Minister, a conviction for a serious criminal offence is a very public event. If a person is convicted of murder or manslaughter or rape, they will have been tried in public and the conviction will be announced in public. However, the public is very much dependent on a member of the press being in court in order for the public to become aware of it. So my question is, Minister, taking into account Article 10 of the GDPR, has any consideration been given to establishing a register of those convicted of serious crimes of violence?
Thank you, Deputy. Maybe just to start by saying I can inform you that there is no register of convicted criminals currently in place, and indeed no such register is under consideration. Justice is administered, as you've rightly said, in public in accordance with the Constitution, and of course court outcomes can be reported in the media. I think the Deputy will appreciate that decisions on whether or not to convict a person or for what crime is a matter for the presiding judge, and quite properly I have no role in this. Under the provisions of the Court Service Act 98, management of the courts is the responsibility of the courts, which again is independent in its exercising of functions. But I can assure the Deputy that the aim of the system is to make Ireland a safer and fairer place, and I think we would all support that. Appropriate sanctions for those who commit crime is key elements of the justice system, and in the interest of public safety, the rehabilitation and the reintegration of offenders into the community, I think, is at its core. This is the most effective and sustainable way to achieve a reduction in reoffending and to encourage and to support a change in behaviour. Records are maintained by the Court Service of all convictions, and as the Deputy would know, Garda vetting provides an essential layer of protection for our most vulnerable people. The National Vetting Bureau Children and Vulnerable Persons Act of 2012 to 16 provides the legislative basis for the mandatory vetting of anyone wishing to undertake certain work or activities relating to children or vulnerable persons, or to provide certain services to children or vulnerable persons. Individuals can also apply to An Garda Síochána for details of their own convictions. Separately, the Deputy will be aware that the programme for government contains a separate commitment to review the Criminal Justice Spent Convictions and Certain Disclosures Act. This is to broaden the range of convictions that can be considered spent. I think it's an important commitment and a design to try and help us move forward to a safer society with safer communities, by making sure that those who make mistakes, that they do have an opportunity to move on with their lives. Where you have a minor crime at a point in their lives, that there is a strong incentive to stop offending and to get their lives back on track. But maybe I would ask the Deputy in his response, obviously he has asked where there is a serious crime, maybe to get into that in a little bit more detail. But I think more generally, to have a general register, it's not something that the Department is looking to do, and it's not something personally that I would favour.
Minister, I'm not suggesting that there would be a register for persons convicted of minor or summary offences, or indeed offences which aren't violent criminal offences. What I'm suggesting arises from the fact that I, like you, recently met Jason Poole, whose sister Jennifer was brutally murdered a year ago. She was murdered by a man who already had a conviction for stabbing another partner of his. The point that Jason Poole made to me, and indeed to many others, was that had she been aware of his violent past, she never would have commenced or continued a relationship with him. So I think there is something that we need to look at here, Minister, in respect of information being provided to affected persons in respect of those who are convicted of crimes of violence. Listen, we publish details about those who are involved in tax fraud. If you're a solicitor or a doctor is struck off the register, that information is provided. I'm not suggesting that this would provide information about people convicted of minor offences, but for those who are convicted of serious criminal acts of violence, I think something needs to be given to the assessment as to how the public can be warned of that, Minister.
I suppose again it goes back to your own original point, and in my response, any person who is convicted of a crime, and indeed a serious crime, will have gone before the courts and will have done so in a very public manner. And obviously there is an ability for the media to report, albeit I accept that that doesn't happen in every instance. In relation to Jason Poole and obviously the awful circumstances of his sister's murder, I cannot commend Jason enough for the work that he has done in advocating on her behalf, and indeed on behalf of all victims of murder essentially, and those at the hands of their partners. What I have done is given a commitment, and it was very clear in our strategy launched last week, to work with An Garda Síochána to examine the possibility of such register for victims or for perpetrators of domestic violence or serious crimes of this type. I've met with the Garda Commissioner and discussed it with him on 2 occasions. I've asked him and his team to come back to me directly as to how this could or may work, obviously taking into account GDPR, looking at other jurisdictions where it has come into place and seeing how this could be applied here. And I've given a commitment to Jason that I will respond to him as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Minister. I suppose it is interesting, Minister, that whether or not a conviction is publicised or not depends completely arbitrarily on whether or not there's a member of the media in court. You could be a person convicted of a rape in Dublin one day and there'd be huge media attention around it, and you could be convicted on another day and there mightn't be that much media attention associated with it. I think it is unreliable to have a system whereby we are dependent upon members of the press being in court in order for the public to be given information that is publicly available and that we say should be publicised. Listen, the way I think this could operate, Minister, and I'd ask you to maybe consider it with your department officials, is that you could have a system whereby a register is kept of those who have committed violent offences for which they've received custodial sentences. And that information would be available to the Gardaí, and the Gardaí could use it as they see fit, particularly in circumstances if people find themselves in a relationship with somebody who previously has shown a propensity to commit violence in a relationship.
I think anything that we would introduce or even consider in this instance would need to be with the support and in consultation with An Garda Síochána to make sure that obviously it is effective in what we are intending to do. I think where you have serious crime and criminal offences being committed, it's really important as well that the punishment matches the crime and that those who are convicted serve the right kind of sentence or penalty, while at the same time acknowledging that we need to have rehabilitation, we need to have reform in our society. But I do think we need to make sure the sentence matches the crime, and that's why in the last week I have made proposals that the general assault, the general assault crime, which a lot of the domestic violence acts happen under, that the maximum penalty would be extended from 5 to 10 years, making sure that if there is a significant penalty applied, even with mitigating factors, guilty pleas and other different elements to a case, that a person will serve the correct time. And I think it's about getting the right balance. I also think, again, we have to make sure that where an individual commits a crime, and again this comes back to serious versus maybe smaller types of crime, that a person is allowed to get on with their life, is allowed to try and change their life and to do so without, I suppose, without a record constantly hindering or preventing them from moving forward. So I think it's about getting that balance, but obviously anything that we do would have to be done in consultation with An Garda Síochána. Thank you.